Well, my name is Paton. I'm an artist. I live in Southampton. I've been here since 1974. I've always considered the east end of Long Island my good luck town. I came here with $40. I'd been in Asia for a year. I left Hawaii, my happy home in Honolulu, and embarked on travels to Asia and Europe. And it took a year, and I flew into Kennedy Airport and had a standing invitation to visit a family friend out here in Southampton. I thought Long Island was 40 miles long, and I asked the pilot. My father was a pilot, so I was comfortable asking a pilot about Long Island. And he said, well, yeah, Southampton's about 100 miles from here, and I was surprised, but I almost went back to Honolulu. It was really a flip of a coin, and it changed my whole life, because I came out here, my friend, our family friend, who I also had a house in Hawaii, got me a job. She recommended that I go to Southampton College and just introduce myself. It just so happened that the director of the art department was there. We got into a conversation, and he said, I'd like to see those drawings that you made during the trip. So I returned the next day with the drawings, and his name was Don. That's my dog. Don Kurtka. And he looked at the drawings and said, you want to go to college here? And I said, I've got no money. And he said, and I'm going back to Honolulu. And he said, no, I think you should compete for a scholarship, which was coming up in about a month. So I competed for that scholarship and got it. And subsequently got a job, and before you know it, I went to a bank in Southampton I had like maybe $25 in my account. And I said to the president of the bank, I need a loan because I needed a truck so I could work and make money. And you know, a young man needs a truck for his surfboards, for everything. And his name was Chester Buttonhouse. This is in 1974. And I saw his son 20 years ago and told him the story. His son cried because he goes, that was my dad. But what Chester did for me was he looked across his desk and said, you look like a good kid. I'll give you that $2,000 loan, even though I had no collateral, nothing. It was just a loan. And that got me going, and I've been here for 45 years. What inspires me to create is quite simply my life. When I was younger, I remember that I would go out and be more of a plein air painter, because I didn't have any ideas. To make a very long story short, as you grow as an artist, you start having an internal dialogue. But that's a hard thing to have when you're young, because you haven't lived much. But that year in Asia, traveling, subsequent things that happened to me, some good, some bad, you know, people dying, things like that, gives you a internal dialogue, and that's a lot of what fuels the imagery in my work. It's sort of like your experiences go into your self, and that's a Cuisinart, and they get all chopped up and they come out in different ways. Just recently I was asked by the Andy Warhol Foundation and the Nature Conservancy to do an event on their beach in Montauk, where Andy Warhol used to have a house. And I did that, and I hadn't really sat out and drawn a scene for a few months, or maybe longer, maybe a year. And I sat on a rock. There was 12 other artists that I invited. We all did plein air work. I sat on a rock and with one tiny little brush did a very detailed drawing of the boulders, the water coming in, the cliffs. And it was really nice, because I love that part of my work, but I have a tendency to work in the studio. I love my studio, I like the music, I like to have a cup of coffee. But what I'm saying is that it's good to remind myself to go out and do that kind of work. We, for 25 years, had a farm in Costa Rica, and that was my studio, but it was the valley that we were in. I painted everybody. I painted the neighbor across the street, his wife, his dogs, his horses, everybody. And it was funny, because 25 years ago, we just recently sold it, but 25 years ago when we bought it, no one knew us. My Spanish wasn't very good. But this was a way for them to get to know me as what I do. And they were, at first, I remember one of the first times I asked if I could paint their grandmother, it's like, okay, who is this guy? But then they see the grandmother on the sheet. and they look at you and they go, well, he's got skill, you know, maybe he's okay. Well, the sea, reoccurring things in my work is probably the most reoccurring thing is the sea. I'm a surfer, I'm a diver. I don't dive anymore, I can't equalize anymore, but I did a lot of diving, free diving. And so I've been surfing since the late 50s. Started surfing in Waikiki when I was a little boy and got the bug. And I mean, it's a great sport. And it's not just the sport, it's where it takes you. You know, exotic places. It seems like all the best surf in the world is in exotic places. So you have to get on a plane and go see it. So the ocean is a big part of the ocean and the creatures in the ocean. One of my favorite, I have a lot of reoccurring themes. One of them is birds that swim underwater and fish that fly out of the water. I love that role reversal. And I've done that a lot of times. And people that I meet, reoccurring in my work. I do like to paint idiomatic sayings, like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's a very funny one. I've done that a number of times where the road is filled with broken billboards saying, have a nice day, you know? And the guy's, you know, like a traveling salesman with a suitcase. Those things, those kind of sayings, those idiomatic sayings, they strike me as humorous. And I like to, that way you never run out of ideas. I mean, you can just come and do one, you know? Yeah. The question is the evolution of my work and how it's gone through changes. And I kind of touched on that in the previous question, which is, as you get older, you have more things to say internally. And so your work becomes an excavation of what's happening to you. But you know, if you've been an artist your whole life, you have nostalgia for, like I was saying, that sort of plein air work that when I was a young student at the Honolulu Academy of Arts, well, I had to go outside because I had no ideas. Zero. And I remember, it's funny, I teach privately. I'll tell you a funny thing about last time I had a contract from an art institution. It was a university, and it said that it was on my contract, stapled crookedly, was a piece of paper that said, it was an oath. And they were asking me to sign this oath that said that I wouldn't try to overthrow the Constitution of the United States from my position as art instructor. So I went to the head of the department, who was also the head of the union, and said, you know, it's funny, I was thinking about doing just that. And he goes, ha ha ha, Paton, just sign it. And I said, I'm not signing this thing, it's shady, it's a McCarthyism thing, you know? I never signed it. Anyways, the evolution of the work is always changing. You have this large, sort of like songwriters, they have like a large body of songs that people often say, how can you remember all the songs? But artists are the same way. They have familiar places that they go to, which I touched on before. Places where I'm very comfortable working with. And the evolution happens when you're not looking. It sort of sneaks up on you. I was in a Biennale in Florence 15 years ago, or 20, I think it was 25 years ago, it was a long time ago. And the painting got damaged when it was returned. And I could have gone through the insurance company, but I'm very unlitigious. And so it was a big painting, and it won the award for painting. It was a beautiful painting, but it was creased. And you can't take a crease out of a painting, I mean, it's really hard. So I just looked at the painting and said, well, parts of it are still okay. So I got out my scissors and my knives and I cut sections out. Sort of like when you cut mercury, it goes like this, but it's still mercury. So I had these sections, and that sort of liberated me to do that a lot. And I have a whole body of work that is like imagine a painting of myself sitting in this chair, an old, you know, people have been doing this for centuries, but the background sometimes is incidental. So I would take paintings that I'd done 10 years before that I had cut up, I have my cut up piles right over there, and I would inlay them around the painting of the figure. And it's sort of like a time machine because I'm doing the painting of the figure, but the background's from 10 years before. And it creates a juxtaposition which is unusual and surprising to me, which is one of the most important things, because as an artist, you better be surprising yourself, otherwise you're repeating yourself, and well, that doesn't work too well. Well, you know, as an artist, you always have one foot on what you know and one foot on what you don't know. And the don't know part is as big as it's ever been for me. You'd think that I would have it all figured out, but I don't. I don't know what I'm going to do. The question was, what's up? What's coming? And like I said, I don't know. And I don't really want to know. The one thing I'd like to do is go out and paint more Andy Warhol Beach. You know, that was a nice, real nice 4 hours. It was hard on my legs and my knees, but I have to remember to go out and paint nature. One of my favorite artists is Van Gogh. I love the way he, I have a lot of books on Van Gogh, but one of them has a picture of a field that is the most boring field you ever saw, and a beautiful Van Gogh drawing of that boring field. That's magic. So I have to get myself out of my chair and force myself to do fresh work all the time. That is the challenge of an artist. If you're working all the time, how do you do that? Well, that's your job. You got to do it. How is my art, how does it relate to this area specifically? Quite a lot, actually. A very large element is the ocean. I live a half mile from the bay, and I live about a mile from the ocean. And we go to both every day. So, as I said before, my love is the ocean. I can never live away from it. I love the desert, mountains and stuff, but day-to-day life, I like being right where I am. In fact, this COVID-19 pandemic has shown me that I don't have to constantly jump on airplanes. I'm very happy being here. I love it. I love it here. And we have a nice home, and our sons live in New York. So, and the fields, the potato trucks is something the fishing boats out of Shinnecock, the potato trucks, I painted them all many times. It's interesting, Mary Stabelic is a very fine artist and a colleague of mine out here, and her family owned a welding concern in Riverhead, and they've been there for generations. And they took, as the story goes, they took military troop carriers and turned them into potato trucks. And that's where the iconic potato truck of the East End comes from. And you know, the whole agricultural aspect of the East End is of interest to me. Farmers, I think they're heroes. And I have friends out here who are farmers, and I've always admired them. I admire their work ethic, their connection to the land. It's, you know, without them, we'd all starve. And people never think about them. They're like unsung heroes. I really admire them very much. And I love their tools. And I like drawing their tools. And I've drawn a lot of them. As far as my portrait work, it's the hardest thing to do. Hold up Jack and Jill went up the hill to a mirror and try to read it. You can't. Meaning that most people don't know what they look like. They know what their reverse image looks like, but they don't know what they look like. But when you pull off a good one, it's really satisfying. Kathleen King came to my studio years ago and was interested in getting a painting. And I said, no, Kathleen, I've known her for a long time. I said, I want to do a portrait of your father, Tate, who the company was named after. The first was Kathleen's, and then she had some business issues, and then she reinvented herself as Tate's. And Tate King was a World War II generation farmer, and he owns North Sea Farms. So I went to his farm, and did some drawings of him, and I did these drawings of Tate, and I turned them into a painting of him with an antique egg grater with the egg carton, which is a wonderful thing to paint because it has this geometry to it. You know what an egg carton looks like. And I paint it's 5 by 6 feet. It hangs in the living room. And she made G clay prints and gave them to all her relatives, all her aunts and uncles. And if you go into Tate's shop, even though she doesn't own it anymore, unless they took it down because they did sell it, but I think it's probably still up. There's a reproduction of that painting to your right, a little bit above a counter. So that was very satisfying for me. And I had the idea, this is going back 15 years, I had the idea of painting all of the farmers on the East End. Ray Halsey of the Green Thumb being one of them. As I said before, I have some friends who are farmers, and the people that own the Green Thumb, the Halseys, are one of those friends of mine, and I know the whole family. So I was going to do a picture of Ray. Actually, I did one, but it didn't come out very good. And that's the way it goes in painting sometimes. It turned into a good painting, but it turned into a painting not of Rick. I turned it into an African-American worker, which is another big story of the East End. But Ray became an African-American. Don't ask me how, but it happened. Yeah, so that's a big. It's a big part of. And I've drawn my kid, everybody. I do a lot of it actually. But John Singer Sargent said that a portrait is a painting where there's something wrong with the chin, meaning that somebody's going to come along and say that's pretty good, but the chin's wrong. And it's really probably the hardest job. The easiest job as an artist, you make a painting and someone loves it and buys it. But to make it look like them is really a challenge. And sometimes you catch it. Sometimes it's like catching lightning in a bottle. Sometimes you really get it. And other times it's a little bit off. Self-portraits that I've done, I got used to people saying, if I said it was a self-portrait, they'd say, well, it looks like you, but after a while I said, that's my portrait of my brother. They go, oh yeah, it looks like you. The question is what do I see as success? Well, I could be mercenary and say when it sells. But actually, that's not the first thing I thought of. The first thing I thought about was time. Time is the most important element in developing a painting. If the paintings don't have the time to season, then they don't get to a place that they can get to. They are arrested development. For me, it's wonderful when a painting gets that history because they get layered and they become deeper and resonate more. If a painting comes together pretty quick, I'm always a little suspicious of it. And one of the important motivators for me is when I walk into the studio every day is sink or swim. Does the painting sink or does it swim? And that's real important to your to be honest. If you feel indifferent, that's the worst thing. If you don't like it, that's the best thing, because then you have something to work on that day. And if you like it, be careful. You have to be very critical to your own work, because the rest of the world is anyways. But that's really not the point. The point is how's it float for you? It's got to float. Otherwise, I mean, it's got to. Well, I like it when they sink. When I was younger, I didn't know that. It's a funny thing about painting. Sometimes you do a painting about something, and that something is why the painting's not working. So then you have to have a coup. You have to have a painting coup. You have to take out the main character. I've had that happen where all of a sudden all the big characters are working much better. So these are things you learn through time and experience. How do I feel when I think a work is done? Yeah, I say suspicious because I have still to this day, after all these years of painting, I'll walk out of the studio and say, boy, that one's done. What a nice way to go, Buster. And then I'll come in the next day and it's like, it's not done. And it's actually, as I said before, I actually love it. because I love it when you feel contemptuous of your own work. That makes you work harder on your work. I think that's something that you have to almost teach, because in your early years it could seem like a crisis. You know, oh my God, I thought it was good and it's not. Yeah. And but now, as I said, it's what gets the painting to that seasoned place, which is really important. Yeah, if you just sort of get up to the plate and hit little loop singles, it's different. Yeah, I love seeing where they go. I've destroyed a lot of paintings because I've had days when I've come in and everything's bad. That's okay too. Yeah. I've been doing this so long that there's a lot of paintings out in the world. So there's a good example of my work already out. So if I destroy everything in here one day, let's say I come in, I won't do it, but it's okay. You just hope that you're doing it intelligently and not because you're in a funk or something, you know. I try to be pretty even keeled. You try to kind of boil it down to like a bricklayer. You go and lay bricks. Mm-hmm. Well, the question was teaching and how does it fit into my life. When I graduated from Southampton College in 1978, I was asked to teach 2 young kids. I had never taught before. I was 24 years old or something. And I didn't know how to do it. But I had received a lot of instruction, starting at the Honolulu Academy of Arts, followed by 3 years at Southampton College, graduating with a BFA. So I had a lot of instruction, and I had some really good professors. One of them was Robert Munford. And so I had that to go on. And I started teaching, and as I said, I've taught in different academies around here and university level. And now I just teach privately here in the studio. And it's such a wonderful, and I know everybody says the same thing, but it's true. Teaching is a great way, and just a very personal way, just to live your life, just to be part of the community, and to help. One thing that I do a lot is that I've done a lot is I've helped young artists prepare portfolios for submission to art schools. And I'm proud to say that every one of them, save one, has gotten into their first choice. The one that didn't got into her second choice. But that's a pretty good record. And I think the reason why I'm successful at this is because I think the people that are looking at the portfolios are basically my age, and I have a strong emphasis on drawing skills. I had one man call me, and he said, "Can you teach my son?" He called from Dallas, and he wanted his son to come and stay here like a camp. And I'd never done that before. I'm very social, but I'm also very private. I don't like being a house guest, and I don't particularly like house guests. It sounds funny for a very social guy, but it's the way I am. And I said, he was going to pay me well, and I said, okay. And the last thing he said is, "Oh, by the way, my son's schizophrenic." And I said, "Well, he's not going to kill us in our beds, is he?" And he goes, No, he's fine. And he goes, "And he can't concentrate for more than 10 minutes. Well, make a long story short, this young man came here, worked longer than I do, much longer than I do. He made me work longer. I was exhausted at the end of the days. He worked longer than I do. He did a whole body of work. He got into the School of Visual Arts. I mean, he just needed a clear spot in which to do the work, and someone that would sort of say, push him a little bit, you know? That to me is a great success story. And so you can see how important teaching is to me. I mean, I teach 3 or 4 days a week, a couple hours a day. And because I have nothing to do except be an artist, I have plenty of time to do it. It doesn't get in my way at all. In fact, it's food for my thought. And it helps me clarify things in my own mind.